Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about the brand new release card Legion, an Omega class mutant, whose power is that he has multiple personality disorder and he houses hundreds or thousands of different mutants, so to speak, personalities inside of him. Each one has their own powers. And that's why the idea behind this card is that it's supposed to be able to manifest all sorts of chaotic situations. It's supposed to be able to do everything. So in that regard, the design for Legion is kind of cool. He has an on-reveal ability that replaces all other locations with the location that you play him at. Now, he was released in Series 4, so I actually nabbed him from the shop for 3,000 tokens. I thought it was worth it to buy him for that price, because if nothing else, he seems like a card that's super, super fun. Genuinely fun to play. That's what my suspicion was. Didn't know if he was going to be good or not, but I thought it was going to be too much fun to not buy. And that theory has been proven correct. He is ridiculous. The games you play him in, they're so wild, they're so unpredictable, you can make entire new lines of play happen that wasn't possible before, and he's very, very hard for your opponent to play around. That being said, he's a 5 energy card, so it's a bit difficult to always be able to find the spot to play him in. He's not going to be useful in every game. So people have been theory crafting a bit what you're supposed to do with Legion or not. What's good? How are you supposed to use him optimally? And the first strategy that people came up with is combining him with Storm. Because Legion and Storm actually do have synergy with each other. If you play Storm in a lane, then the next turn is the last turn you have to play cards there. You can play Legion in that lane to copy the Storm effect into all the other lanes as well, making every location flooded, and they all actually become flooded the same turn, which means you can lock out the game. You can play Storm on turn 4, Legion on turn 5, and then effectively there is no turn 6. No one can play anything on turn 6. With the exception of Jeff. So that I've tried that combo, and it's certainly infuriating for your opponent when you land it, and it's infuriating for you when your opponent lands it on you. But I don't think it's a problem in the meta. I don't think that's sort of a problem combination or anything, because honestly, from my own playtesting, and I've run a bunch of Conquest runs, and I've tried to run a bunch of ladder games with this as well. I'm gonna say this combo is not really as good as people make it out to be. It's not as hard to counter it as people might think it is. And I have actually struggled to put together consistent win streaks using this combo. But here it is anyway. I'll show you some gameplay footage and the deck list. The idea behind the deck is that you're supposed to use very powerful early game cards so that you take the lead early. And then you play Storm on turn 4, Legion on turn 5, and then ideally you have enough power to where you just win from that position. You also play cards like Nebula and Sunspot, your 2 big power generators. They both gain from passive turns. If your opponent doesn't play any cards in the Nebula lane, she grows. If you don't spend any energy, Sunspot grows. So both Sunspot and Nebula will continue to become stronger and stronger, even on that locked out turn 6. Now, I still did have to run armor in this deck list because, unfortunately, we are in a meta where Killmonger is really, really popular, which means any sort of strategy that hinges on 1-cost cards, like Nebula, like Sunspot, you're going to run into Killmonger, and then you're just going to struggle to win. You can also predict the Legion play by changing the Storm lane into something else with your own location changing cards. An interesting variation of this is obviously that the deck itself can run magic. So that you can first play magic to trick your opponent into thinking that it's going to be a 7-turn game, and they're going to play accordingly, and they're going to hold some cards back, and they're going to just play a bit slower because they think they're going to have 7 turns. Then, when you do the Storm Legion combo, not only are they not going to get a turn 7, they're not going to get a turn 6 either, which usually takes them completely by surprise. Or you can just keep the magic. You can keep it if it's a game where you want to have a 7-turn game. You have that flexibility. Then you can instead use Legion on the Limbo lane to turn all locations into Limbo to make sure that your opponent cannot change Limbo into something else to ensure that there will be a 7-turn game. There's a lot of wonky stuff you can do here with Legion with this sort of deck, but I'm gonna say that this is small brain. This is small brain stuff, the Legion+Storm combo. I don't think this is the right way to play Legion. I don't think this is the way you should play Legion. And here's the biggest drawback with this deck. The biggest drawback with this deck is that you cannot win 8 cubes with it. You can't. And that is a huge drawback. Because you do your combo on turn 5, and then you go into turn 6. Your opponent realizes that they can't win because they can't play any cards, and they retreat. So you're never actually going to play the game out. They're only going to stay in if they have some sort of magical counter, like Jeff, for example. So the only reason why the game would end is because you're actually going to lose. This is a huge problem in Conquest as well, because this deck is sort of like, it's a surprise strategy, kind of like Mr. Negative decks. Mr. Negative decks, when you run them in Conquest, you want to take your opponent by surprise and you want to win 8 cubes before your opponent realizes what you're doing. Because you can adjust. You can adjust when you know your opponent is playing a Mr. Negative deck, and you can adjust your strategy to make sure that they have a harder time, like actually, making any good headway against you. The whole point of Mr. Negative decks is to win 8 cubes by catching your enemy by surprise. This functions the same way. This is also a deck that is supposed to catch your enemies by surprise, but your surprise is only ever going to win you 4 cubes. And then that surprise stops working. Here's my review of Legion, like as a card. It's actually just a pretty good card by itself. It's actually just a card that you can kinda just put into any deck, and it's gonna perform pretty well. Because Legion sort of like answers a very huge meta question, which probably didn't have a definitive answer before, and that is the question of how important are locations. How important are locations to your overall sort of like odds of winning or losing a game? And I think Legion is answering that question, that locations might be a bit more important than we think they are. They are the great equalizer. They're the reason why the meta can never be totally dominant for like one deck, because the locations make every game sort of like a roll of the dice. But now you can control the dice, and you can create some sort of wacky situations with this. And if you use Legion in the big brain mode, which is to not do the Storm combo, and instead just play him in your deck and use him as a way of just using the locations that you're offered as a weapon against your opponent, I actually think that's a better way of using Legion. I think he's more powerful in that role. There's going to be games where he does nothing. There's going to be games where the locations aren't really going to tip the scales in either direction. And then you're just not going to play him. He's still a 5/8, right? He still has a respectable amount of power for his energy cost, so you're still going to be able to play him and just get 8 power, which is fine. But there are also going to be games where he is just going to turn everything on its head. And if you can calculate this, you can use your big brain math and sort of calculate what's going to happen. You can pull off some really, really insane stuff with this card. So I'm going to show you that on screen here. I just put him in a Thanos Destroy Shell, and I ran an entire Conquest from Proving Grounds through Silver, through Gold, got the Infinity ticket, so like 6 wins in a row. And there are quite a few games where Legion absolutely won me the game, and he won me the game in like the wackiest sort of like One Piece, Luffy D Monkey, Toon Force sort of way, where like it's chaos. It's pure chaos in the games where you pull off some wacky stuff with him. But it's controlled chaos. So what's cool about the cards like this is that it's a symmetrical effect. It affects both you and your opponent. But the difference is that you know that it's coming and your opponent doesn't, which means it's a net positive for you. And if you can harness that power and you can like really figure out where to use Legion to the best of his abilities, he is actually probably better than people think he is. He is not just a meme card. He is skill testing. I think if you are a sort of like a new player or an intermediate player, don't really have all the synergies figured out in your head yet or memorized, you might have some problems actually like making good use out of him. But if you are sort of like an advanced player who know your stuff, you know your locations, you know how different cards interact with different locations, I think you'll be surprised at the like inherent power of this card. I think this card is going to take people by surprise and it's going to turn out to be a lot better than people think it is. So that's the video, people. Legion, actually pretty good. actually pretty good. Better than I thought it would be. And I'm not sure if you want to open Spotlight caches for him or not. It's a good week for Spotlight caches anyway, because it's both High Evolutionary and Darkhawk that are also in the list. They're popular cards. I think a lot of people are going to open Spotlight caches for those cards. And then they're also going to get Legion. And then they're going to look up this video to find out if Legion is good or not. And yes, yeah, he actually is. If you already have High Evolutionary and Darkhawk like me and were considering skipping out on this week, I changed my mind when I saw that he was Series 4. And you could get him for 3,000 tokens, and I thought it was worth it. So if you're in that position, I'm going to say, yeah, spend 3,000 tokens on him because he's fun and he's good and he's just like a joy to play. He like just all of it. Whenever you have a good opportunity to play Legion, you just feel like a king. You feel like you're the smartest goddamn player in the world. And yeah, it's a fun time. It's a fun time and a good card. So that's the review, people. Thank you for watching. As always, leave a like. Consider subscribing if you thought that this was informative. There's going to be more Snap content on this channel. And I will see you again some other time for something completely different.